Rory McIlroy just said out loud what every PGA Tour player has been quietly thinking, and the timing could not be more dangerous. Asterisk, asterisk. Nobody expected this. Not this week. Not from him. Not right before one of the most important announcements in modern professional golf history. Rory McIlroy stood in front of reporters ahead of the U.S. Open and said something that stopped the golf world cold. Not because he attacked LIV Golf. Not because he called out another player. Not because he created some personal drama. He questioned the PGA Tour itself. He questioned the direction its own leadership is taking it. And he did it days before PGA Tour CEO Brian Rolap is set to deliver what could be the single most consequential update to the Tour's competitive structure in a generation. The question Rory is asking is simple on the surface, but devastating underneath it. What if the PGA Tour has been fixing a problem that no longer exists? What if everything the Tour has built, restructured, and redesigned over the last 3 years was a reaction to a threat that is now fading? And in reacting so aggressively, the Tour has accidentally created a new set of problems nobody planned for. That is what is sitting on the table right now. And by the time this video is done, you're going to understand exactly why the next few weeks could reshape professional golf for the next decade. Before we go any further, if you follow professional golf and you want to stay ahead of this story as it develops, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This situation is moving faster than most people realize, and what happens in the next few weeks is going to matter for years. To understand why Rory's comments landed the way they did, you need to understand the context of what is actually being proposed. For months, the PGA Tour's Future Competition Committee has been working on a new structural framework for the Tour, a framework built around something called the two-track model. And on the surface, it sounds clean and logical. Track 1 becomes the Tour's premier level. The biggest stars, the largest prize funds, the highest profile events. Under the current discussions, Track 1 will include somewhere between 12 and 16 elite PGA Tour events, alongside the 4 major championships, the Players' Championship, the FedEx Cup playoff events, and international competitions like the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup. It would essentially be golf's top lane, the place where the game's biggest names compete most frequently, and where the money and the eyeballs and the prestige all concentrate. That part of the plan is relatively straightforward. It is Track 2 where things get complicated, and it is Track 2 where Rory McIlroy has fired his warning shot. Track 2 would function as a secondary pathway, a level where players compete for the opportunity to earn their way into Track 1. The concept is borrowed loosely from the promotion and relegation models you see in European football leagues, the idea being that clear competitive pathways and defined performance standards create a healthier and more competitive ecosystem overall. The PGA Tour's leadership believes this structure could energize the sport, create stakes at every level, and give the overall system more clarity and purpose. But Rory's response to Track 2 was not measured or diplomatic. He called it, in his words, a glorified Corn Ferry event. That single comment immediately became the biggest talking point in golf. Because if Track 2 starts being perceived that way, not just by one player but by the broader golf audience, by sponsors, by television partners, by fans, then something very specific and very damaging begins to happen. The events placed in Track 2 do not just lose a classification. They risk losing something that once lost is almost impossible to recover. They risk losing their identity. And this is where Rory's concern stops being abstract and starts being about real tournaments with real history. He mentioned the RBC Canadian Open specifically. Think about what that tournament represents. It is one of the oldest events in professional golf. It is a national championship with generations of history behind it. A tournament that has crowned champions across multiple eras of the sport. A tournament that carries weight and tradition and meaning that goes well beyond its prize fund or its field size. Under the proposed two-track system, events like the Canadian Open could find themselves classified as Track 2 tournaments. And Rory's argument is simple and direct. Once you label something secondary, perception changes. Sponsors begin asking questions. Players begin making different decisions about where to invest their preparation. Fans begin paying less attention. And restoring that lost prestige once it has slipped away is not a matter of making an announcement or increasing a purse. It takes years. Sometimes it never fully comes back. The PGA Tour has spent a century and a half building a calendar of tournaments with genuine meaning attached to them. Rory is asking whether the two-track model inadvertently turns some of those tournaments into collateral damage. That is not a small concern. That is a structural question about the soul of professional golf. And it does not stop there. Here is something I want you to think about while we go deeper into this. The PGA Tour is about to make decisions that will affect not just the players you watch on Sunday afternoons, but the tournaments your parents watched, the events your grandparents followed, the competitions that gave the sport its texture and its weight. Are those events safe in this new system? Keep that question in the back of your mind, because we're going to come back to it. Rory's second major concern is arguably even more important than the track classification issue, and it requires going back to 2022 to fully understand. When LIV Golf arrived, it did not arrive quietly. It arrived with hundreds of millions of dollars, enormous guaranteed contracts, an explicit goal of pulling the biggest names in professional golf away from the PGA Tour. Within months, household names were gone. Dustin Johnson, Phil Mickelson, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau. The departures came fast, and the consequences were immediate. The PGA Tour found itself in an existential fight it had not anticipated and had not prepared for. The response was aggressive and in many ways necessary. Prize funds were dramatically increased. Signature events were introduced to concentrate the best fields into premium showcases. Qualification systems were tightened to make elite status more meaningful. The entire competitive calendar was reorganized with the explicit goal of keeping the sport's biggest names inside the PGA Tour ecosystem and giving casual fans a clearer reason to tune in. According to Rory, those decisions made sense at the time. The circumstances demanded a strong response, and the tour delivered one. But here is what Rory is now saying publicly, and here is where the entire conversation shifts. The circumstances have changed. LIV Golf, which was meant to be a permanent alternative infrastructure for professional golf, is now operating on borrowed time. Its primary backer, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, has confirmed that funding ends after the 2026 season. The league is searching for private investors. Its future is genuinely uncertain, and the entity that forced the PGA Tour into emergency restructuring mode is no longer the same threat it once was. Rory is asking a question that deserves a serious answer. Should the PGA Tour continue operating as though the emergency is still happening? Should it keep building a structure designed to fight a war that may already be ending? Or should it step back, take stock of what actually works, and consider whether some elements of the old system were better than the chaos of the last 3 years made them appear? That argument is gaining traction, and it is gaining traction fast, because Rory is not the only voice saying it. Jack Nicklaus, 18 major championships, the most decorated player in the history of the sport, has also raised concerns about the direction of these proposed changes. Nicklaus specifically questioned the idea of clustering major tournaments too closely together in the calendar. His concern is that compressing too many high-stakes events into too short a window creates fatigue problems for players and diminishes the individual weight of each event. When you have Jack Nicklaus and Rory McIlroy both expressing public caution about the same set of proposals, that is not background noise. That is signal. Those are two of the most credible voices professional golf has ever produced, and both of them are telling the PGA Tour's leadership to slow down and think carefully before locking anything in. Now here is something about Rory's position that makes his comments even more significant. He is not sitting inside the committee meetings. He is not helping draft these proposals. He stepped back from that role, which means when he speaks about this publicly, he is not defending a decision he helped make. He is observing from the outside, looking at what the tour is building from the perspective of a player and a fan of the sport, and what he is seeing is making him uncomfortable. That matters, because it means the concerns he is raising are not political. They are not strategic positioning. They are a genuine assessment from one of the game's great thinkers about whether the direction the tour is heading is actually the right one. And now here is the piece of this story that most people are not thinking about yet. What happens to the sponsors? What happens to the television partners? A tournament value to a commercial partner is not just about prize money or field strength. It is about perception. It is about the story the event tells. It is about whether a sponsor can put its brand next to this tournament and have that association feel like a statement about excellence and importance. If Track 2 becomes widely perceived as a secondary tier, if the Rory McIlroys of the world are publicly calling it a glorified developmental tour, what does that do to the conversations happening right now between the PGA Tour and its commercial partners? Those partners are watching. They are reading the same interviews you are reading. They are doing the same math. And if the math starts suggesting that their events are being quietly repositioned down the prestige ladder, the conversations in those boardrooms are going to change very quickly. That is a risk the PGA Tour cannot afford to ignore, and it is a risk that Rory's comments have now made impossible to dismiss. So, where does this all go from here? Next week, Brian Rolap is expected to deliver one of the most significant public updates on the tour's structural future since he took over as CEO. The Future Competition Committee has been meeting for months. Momentum has been building. A policy board vote is expected before the Travelers Championship. If that vote passes, the framework for the new PGA Tour structure moves one step closer to becoming reality. And that means the window for raising concerns, for slowing down, for asking whether the plan is actually right, that window is narrowing. What Rory did this week was use his platform to push back before the door closes. He is not saying the PGA Tour is wrong. He is not saying change is bad. He is saying that the specific changes being proposed carry specific risks that deserve specific answers before anyone signs off on them. How many players move between tracks? How exactly does qualification work? How do sponsors and television partners get protected? How do historic tournaments maintain their identity inside a tiered system? How does a tour ensure that Track 2 does not become what Rory fears it will become? Those questions do not have public answers yet. And the absence of those answers is exactly why the next few weeks are going to be so important to watch. Here's the bottom line, and here's why this story is bigger than one press conference or one player's opinion. The PGA Tour spent a better part of 3 years in crisis mode, reacting to LIV golf, restructuring in real time, making decisions under pressure that were designed for a specific set of circumstances. Those circumstances are changing. The threat that forced emergency response is weakening. And now the question sitting in front of the tour's leadership is whether the structure they built under pressure is actually the right structure for the long term, or whether it was the right structure for a fight that is almost over. Rory McIlroy is asking that question publicly. Jack Nicklaus is asking it quietly. Sponsors are asking it in private meetings. Players are asking it in locker rooms. And in a few days, Brian Rolap is going to step in front of cameras and give an answer. Whether that answer satisfies the people asking the question is something nobody knows yet. But one thing is clear. The future of professional golf is not settled. It is being decided right now, in real time, with enormous stakes attached to every choice. And the most important voices in the sport are not ready to stop asking questions. Stay subscribed, because when that announcement drops, we're going to break it down completely. And based on everything happening right now, it is going to be one of the most important stories in professional golf this year.